Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobhit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. Hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Product Manager podcast. I have a very special guest, Aniket Vaidya, who's a product leader currently on the executive product leadership team at Atlassian and previously was Group PM at Google. Aniket loves to build exceptional products, exceptional teams. He's worked on many 0 to 1 products as well as 1 to 100, like with scaling to billions of global users. I know many of you want to be doing something like that, so he brings a lot of experience in that place. And he's an expert in identity, payments, risk, compliance. At Google, he's always been recognized as a top product management talent. Aniket, welcome to the podcast and great to have you here.
Hi, Shobhit. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
We're going to jump into Google first because it's just a company that everyone aspires to be at. So tell me more about the group product manager role at Google and a bit about the role, and then how did you get there? What was your path to it?
So the group product role at Google is a pretty senior role, has a significant scope. You are typically managing a group of product managers and leading a pretty significantly important large area for the company. So my scope was real identity at Google. So what I built for the company was this horizontal infrastructure that allowed us to look at individuals and organizations as real entities that interacted with different Google products and look at their journeys from onboarding to managing their information, to verifying their information, to then eventually, let's say if they wanted to leave Google and take their data with them, like how would we kind of have that end of life kind of experience as well. So end-to-end ownership. And then also looking at how this product infrastructure worked with all of the rest of Google. So think products like YouTube, Play, Cloud, any kind of big product that you can think of that Google offers has these real identity experiences intertwined with them. So I was working with leadership teams across all of these different product areas and then driving outcomes for their end-to-end journeys with real world identity integrations being seamless and smooth. So this is kind of my scope there. And my path to GPM was pretty interesting, very fun. I started at Google 11 years ago, 2013, as a L4 kind of non-PM person. So I joined in a product adjacent role. It was more focused on consumer operations, product strategy, like informing product strategy and kind of user insights into that roadmap. I did that for a few years and then moved into product management formally. And I had kind of grown at Google to a senior PM L6 level. And then I transferred into like the PM ladder at the same level. So I was able to do kind of the what they call at Google a ladder transfer. And that transfer was an interesting process in itself. Like there's like lots of like interview process loops and artifacts and rotations I had to do to get there. And then I grew to a GPM L7 at Google while I was kind of in that team and from the L6 to the L7 role. So the area that I was leading was actually really critical for Google, and that kind of allowed me to kind of grow into this kind of GPM role because of all the there were two kind of big reasons for that. Like one was that there was this increased focus on protecting democracies worldwide. So there was this 2018 midterm elections in the US where there was a push for there to be transparency around who is participating in these election outcomes. And Google at that time was asked, hey, what is Google doing kind of in this domain? And there was a huge push from the company to kind of look at identities, real identities especially, and who are they? Are they who they say they are? How can we bring confidence and transparency to that ecosystem? So that was kind of my starting point. I looked at building election advertiser verification experiences for US, then went to India, Europe, then kind of building out that global infrastructure. So that was like one big kind of reason. The second reason this area was really important was related to market dynamics. Like more users were coming online. COVID accelerated a lot of like commerce and other actions to happen online, which meant that you couldn't be there in person. So your digital representation, your online identity, your real identity had to be well kind of understood, verified for you to unlock actions, do commerce and other actions. So that kind of coincided with me kind of taking over this domain, and then it being really important for Google to kind of invest in this area. And the third reason, like kind of additional thing kind of that's adjacent to that is like all the compliance regulations. So a lot of the world is getting increasingly regulated. So an understanding of like who is acting on these platforms, whether it's the buyers or the sellers or the consumers who are like accessing and let's say moving money, all those considerations become like really like important in terms of like understanding the identity. So my path to GPM was based on some of the market forces, some of the being at the right place at the right time, but also kind of taking on these like big complex problems, delivering on them, and then kind of building a long-term product strategy and roadmap, and then kind of selling that to the leadership team, hiring great talent, and then kind of building on those strategies and executing and delivering outcomes.
I'm going to dig into like some of these things that you mentioned. So let's go back to like prior to when you were like formally in the product management ladder. Tell us more about your path of like actual transition. Did you like do certain projects? Did you do certain interviews? People are always curious about that as well.
My kind of path there was through a rotation. Like, so I formally rotated and was a full-time rotator working with a product manager. Rotators so it's a formal thing at Google where when you are looking to explore new kind of, let's say, domains or new role types like product management, you're allowed to actually go and be a part of that team for a certain time frame. You can do rotations at like a 20% capacity, which is like you are like spending, let's say, one day in a week kind of working on this kind of team, helping those teams with their kind of outcomes, whatever they might be. Or you can be a full-time rotator, which is like that you basically leave your team for a duration of time, 6 months, whatever, and you can actually get and experience the role and the domain in a complete way, because you're just then working full-time on that opportunity. So there were also like opportunities to either do kind of a almost like a bungee, like you go there, you come back to your previous team, or there were options at Google to basically cut your ties with your previous team and hope for the best, like that you go and do this rotation, and then you'll if you're successful, you basically kind of are able to work in that team. Otherwise, you basically have to look for a new job or look for a new opportunity within the company. So I chose the latter. My manager kind of encouraged it, and like my future manager encouraged it, and also I was like, like if I want to do this, I want to go like head first, kind of do this, do it well, and I know like I'd be like successful. And I have previous product management experience, or I had previous product management experience. So prior to Google, I had actually spent a few years being a PM. So I was pretty confident going in, and then the stars aligned, and like I was able to be successful with that kind of transition. But the process itself was like doing the job, like being a PM, creating strategies, PRDs, artifacts that allowed me to kind of then take it to the committee. That committee basically decides whether the artifacts like look like strong and whether you are able to kind of transition. And at that time, Google also had formal interviews. So I had to actually do the full interview loop, like from like a product sense kind of an interview to a technical interview to a kind of are you able to work with engineers? Like there's all these kind of different interviews that an external PM might have to go through, or PM aspirant candidate might have to go through. And then the last thing is feedback. So you actually have your like manager in that rotating team write for you saying that, hey, Aniket is kind of doing a good job with kind of this rotation. Your peers write for you. So my TL at that time, engineering lead, basically wrote for me. My design lead wrote for me. My operations POC kind of wrote for me. So all of those people, like that becomes your packet, your interview feedback, your feedback from your peers and your managers and your leaders, and then artifacts that you put together. And all of them get evaluated by a PM, kind of a leadership committee that then says, yes, Aniket is ready. And then they do a level evaluation. Can you keep the level that you are at? Or typically what ends up happening at Google is that you get down leveled when you move to PM. So you'll actually kind of end up losing one level. But I was able to kind of keep my level. That's kind of depends on your experience and what you're doing.
Anything you did that helped you keep your level?
Yeah, there are a few things that you kind of can do to improve your chances of kind of keeping your level. The first one being, how do you kind of perform in your interviews, right? Like, do you like this goes to like how PM levels work at Google. Like, let's say if you are L5 PM and an L6 PM, there is a difference in like what the expectations are from these levels. So as a L6 PM, we expect you to have like bigger scope, bigger ownership, broader outlooks. Like your vision should be pretty like you should come off that as somebody who can like lead larger areas than kind of just your area. At L5, you're expected to be an expert in your area. You need to be able to kind of lead that part of your portfolio, that feature set, like that roadmap end to end. But at an L6, we expect you to lead an area which might have multiple kind of subdomains under that, and be successful in leading that. So when you're interviewing, like and answering questions, let's say on product sense, do you only talk about kind of your domain and answer kind of that question in that one kind of narrow view, or do you actually answer that really well, but then also kind of up level and say, okay, but my vision for if I had to kind of build a bigger product around this kind of concept is I would do this and that, right? I'll give you a concrete example. And this was actually the question I got asked in my ladder transfer kind of interview, where they asked me to design an intelligent Google refrigerator. And then what I ended up doing was that I kind of designed that refrigerator. I gave them a roadmap, but I said that, like this is, but for me, a part of a bigger play that Google can do, which will be a smart appliances play. And what I'd like to really build is this portfolio of products that go from a refrigerator to a television to a smart home. Like all of those things should come together into this bigger strategy. And these are my high level things on how I would think about that one kind of product area. So immediately you've gone from like being like an L5, L6 PM to maybe like a L7 PM who kind of owns this large kind of area. So that's just a quick example from a interviewing perspective. Like how do you position things? Are you narrow or broader in your perspective? Then there are other things around like what kinds of projects do you pick? Do you have the opportunity to actually in your rotation pick projects or scope that is like bigger than or at the level at which you're targeting to keep your same level? And do you push in some ways your leadership, your managers to be like, hey, I'm ready for like bigger scope, so that your artifacts by kind of definition show that bigger scope. So when the company is looking at it, they immediately are able to see that. And then really quickly, the last thing is like, how do your peers perceive you as, right? That's a large part of your kind of feedback that comes in. Like, do they see you as like a more junior PM who's starting in that kind of field, or do they see you as a more senior PM? Like, how do you show up? Like, how do you kind of build relationships? How do you kind of deliver outcomes? All of that kind of matters. So it's a well-rounded kind of play you have to make. And if you're able to do it, then you keep your level.
It seems you were very aware of like the difference in different levels and very intentional about do all these elements play to that. The project I'm doing, the skills I'm demonstrating, the impression I'm building, and then how I do this in interviews.
Yeah. And I would say I wasn't fully there. Having spent my time like in the PM ladder, like I was a senior PM and a GPM GPM for about 3.5 years, senior PM for about another 3 years. So some of it like has refined. So when I answer, like it is kind of a combination of that. At that time, I would say I was more naive, but still like I was, I had that perspective, and I had some mentors and some other kind of leaders in the company who were able to actually tell me that, Aniket, like this is important. Like make sure that you are, when you're interviewing, you're kind of keeping this bigger kind of perspective. And generally like how I approach things is like in a structured way, where I'd be like, okay, what are all my dimensions to kind of optimize for when I'm going for these interviews? How can I kind of make each one of them like the best it can be? So ended up like being a combination of luck in some ways, preparation, and being thoughtful about and intentional about how are you kind of making each one of these kind of be successful. And some of it is just like you showing up with the right mindset. Like I feel like a lot of times like PMs are the leaders in that kind of space. And when you show up in meetings, you go up to leadership, right? You're going to customers, you're learning from them. If you have that perspective of you kind of showing up as a leader, you often then exhibit the right things that will make you successful, in kind of then showing the right kind of skills, the right kind of approaches that people start to recognize. So just that is how I operated, and some of it, that was maybe in some ways the luck aspect of it. Like, given that I've always operated that way, it was easy for me to kind of show up that way. And then part of it was preparing, understanding the ladder and what Google expects at these different levels.
I love your overall thinking and how you approach these things. So let's talk a bit more about day-to-day at Google. I'm not going to ask you a typical week question. Tell me about maybe some of the projects or missions that you've led, and just to give a sense of scope at both the senior PML6 level and then the group PML7 level.
So over let's say the 6-ish, 7-ish year time horizon, there were a few key kind of priorities that I helped kind of unlock for Google. And I would say they were across 3 big dimensions. The first dimension was around how do we help build trusted ecosystems? Like, how do we kind of enable Play as a product to be the best kind of version of itself, like where the publishers of apps are trustworthy, their apps are adding value to users, right? So that is one kind of consideration. The other side of it is people who download those apps and use those apps, do they feel satisfied with what they're getting? Do they see the right value that is being kind of created for them, right? So how do we create these trusted ecosystems? And you can take that same example to ads, you can take it to cloud, and really YouTube creators, all of these products. And a lot of it is anchored in this kind of identity and knowing who are you, who you say you are, kind of answers. And kind of I was able to kind of build those experiences. And that's kind of one dimension to it. The second was the business outcomes around compliance. Is Google compliant to the various kind of regulations that apply to different products that we launched across the world? Google is probably one of the most diverse companies in the world with the types of products it has, the wide range and its availability across the world. So compliance and regulations are a complex beast to be able to kind of wrangle and do the right things. And there is a lot of compliance obligations when it comes to money movement. Governments around the world want to know that the money that is coming into the country is being kind of transferred, is not, as an example, laundered money and things like that. So there's a ton of those payments compliance regulations, and then there is a lot of newer regulations that are around not money movement, but just identities, age assurance. Are the users on your platform over the age of consent? Are they over the age of 18 or whatever that kind of age is in that country? So I led a bunch of these compliance programs for Google, including global kind of age assurance as an example, where I had to kind of make sure that Google was compliant. And the third kind of area was around just pure risk mitigation. We have a really rich data set around users, their interactions on different products, their identities. And I was able to actually build this kind of infrastructure that allowed us to do really effective risk detection steps, and then also risk mitigation. What do you do if risk is identified? So generally trust, where elections and other kind of related efforts kind of come together. The second being compliance, and the third being kind of pure trust and safety, protecting Google from abuse. And over the years, tying to your kind of original question, as a senior PM and then a GPM, these were the 3 product outcomes, business outcomes I was trying to optimize for. The starting point was more trust focused, and then I kind of increased my scope as a GPM to include these compliance outcomes, to include these risk outcomes as well, and building that horizontal infrastructure for all of these different products in the company to be able to kind of get good outcomes along these 3 dimensions.
Just looking at your recent transition, so Group PM, you were leading all these initiatives, and now you're head of product AI for Confluence, Loom, and Trello, as per your LinkedIn. So First of all, are you an AI expert?
No, I'm not.
Have you worked on AI before?
I have. One of the teams I was leading was actually an ML team that was transitioning to AI. It was a part of my kind of portfolio that did document-based kind of AI. So a very small like fraction of it, but definitely I wouldn't say I've like worked in AI or Gen AI before. Yeah.
So how did you position yourself for this role, which seems to be like very much bringing AI across Atlassian's products? Tell us more about this story of this transition, especially in this tough job market.
So there are a few things to this. The first is, how do you kind of position yourself and what matters? Like in these kind of transitions, like what are hiring managers or these like companies looking for when you're joining them, let's say in their executive kind of leadership teams. The second is, how do you kind of build your skill sets to be kind of ready for these opportunities the best you can, to be kind of able to show that you know enough, you're dangerous enough, and are able to kind of build towards this this expertise that you eventually have to have AI in this case. And the third is like the mindset of the hiring manager. Like, what do they optimize for? What do they value? Do they value like deep domain expertise, or do they value a great craft, right? And the right kind of mindset, first principles kind of approach. And does that kind of really give them enough signals for them to believe that this person can ramp up and be a domain expert? So all three kind of matter. So in my kind of transition, in my experience, like when I was looking to move out of Google, I had a few offers with different companies. And these principles like came from like from these like multiple experiences, not just one experience. So I had offers within Google, and then I had offers outside of Google. But the principles remain consistent. So the first to like how do you kind of showcase yourself, right? Like what do you kind of bring to the table? As a product manager, I would say you are the business lead. You own business outcomes. Like that's the first mindset that you need to have. You need to care deeply about customers. You need to care about their pain points, the jobs to be done, and everything else follows, right? Like so are you kind of bringing that business kind of mindset, impact-driven mindset to kind of your conversations when you are kind of going through interview processes? Before even you have the interviews, you have to be, you have to get there. Like you have to get the foot in the door. You have to get the first interview, and the process starts from there first. And a lot of my kind of experience, like all the offers I ended up having were from people in my network, people who I knew, I had worked with, or I had known my work, and they were the ones who were like, "Hey, Aniket would be a good fit for this opportunity." And then you have to do everything right. Like after that, you have to be like really good at your interviews. Like you need to do all those things. But that foot in the door is important. So I'll start there, and getting that kind of network engaged, keeping it like active. And I didn't do it perfectly. Like I have lots of learnings over that, and we can discuss that separately. But like I think that network is critical, and you kind of being very thoughtful about where you apply. You don't want it to be like you are applying everywhere and then like hoping for the best. No, you have to be intentional. You have to be like, where are you? Who are you reaching out to? How are they going to position you for that opportunity, right? And you doing that is really critical. And once you've done that, right, then the second kind of perspective, which I was talking about, comes in, is how do you position yourself, right? Like for me, like I was looking for the right next opportunity, the right like next manager who I was excited to work with. And I really wasn't too opinionated about which domain I'm going to be in. I was like, like the way the way I had this conversation with my manager now at Atlassian was that I want to be on your leadership team, and I will actually help you solve the problems that you need me to solve, right? And through the process, like he was like, AI is top of mind for me. Can you help me solve that problem, right? So your positioning as like that business leader who's like wants to deliver that impact, wants to kind of solve the right things for the users, is kind of the differentiator for you.
You're shattering a myth that a lot of PMs have. So with AI becoming top of mind for a lot of hiring managers, business leaders, there is a myth that I'm seeing that, so for you to succeed as a product manager, as a product leader in this area, you need to be an AI expert. And you now talked about positioning yourself. So, like, what was your positioning?
So as I said, like my positioning was that, hey, like I am a seasoned product leader who can drive business outcomes. And if AI is the means to that end of those business outcomes, I'll use AI. But not everything has to be solved through AI, or it will make sense to solve through AI. So that was kind of my like main positioning, right? But then also with that, I showed my domain expertise through the small team that I was leading to my own research. Like I've been playing around with ChatGPT, with Claude, with now Manos, right? All of these technologies, like I had a working kind of knowledge of, but I wasn't an expert. I wasn't doing that as a day-to-day job thing, right? Like, which is probably the best way to learn is when you're doing it as your day job. But I was still trying to keep up with trends. I was trying to learn. I was trying to use it for my kind of own use cases as best as I could. Gemini as well within Google, like we had access to Gemini, and that was the second pillar that I have in my mind, is that you want to also show that you can learn, or you are interested in learning, and you have that curious kind of mindset. As a PM, you need to be deep in technology. You need to be a technologist at heart, in some ways, right? So a combination of those is like what you can do. And then there's the third thing, which is the mindset of the hiring kind of manager and the teams, which we can get to. But yes, like that myth of like you need to be an AI expert is probably isn't, I would say, the biggest kind of contributor to success, right? And the another kind of side thing I'll say is that there are very few AI experts in the industry right now. Like there is a small group that actually knows it, but people haven't like really gone deep everywhere. Like how many success stories do you see with true kind of business applications being built with kind of AI? Like, there is a few, there are many more that are coming, but it's a small set of like what you can call super kind of users, or experts on AI. It's such a rapidly evolving field that even experts can actually be like, okay, you've missed out on like a couple of months of like advancements, right? It's such a rapidly kind of changing field. So that's the other thing. Like if you are aspiring to be a AI PM, don't feel like you are behind in some ways just because you're not working on AI day to day. There are very few like real experts in the field. But if you have these core foundational PM skills that make you a really strong, effective PM, you can translate them to actually be a strong kind of AI PM as well.
I have a guess what you're going to say, but I'll let you talk a bit more about mindset of the hiring team. Demystify more of that for us.
To me, like this is like what I evaluate in my leaders, my places where I would like to kind of go and work at. Is there that kind of mindset that, hey, I'm going to hire a great person, right? A person who I think is has a strong craft, right? Who can kind of operate in ambiguity, who is thoughtful, collaborative, right? Wants to have fun building things, and then everything else follows. Domain expertise follows, AI expertise follows. Like all of that is like a second order thing in some ways, because those are skills you can learn. You can have experts who can like collaborate, right? Like you can have a fantastic engineering lead who is a AI kind of expert in some ways that can actually build you up and kind of partner with you on launching kind of things that you would want to for those business outcomes. But that mindset, having that open kind of mindset as like, hey, I'm going to hire the best person for this job, regardless of if they have the domain expertise or not, is what like I value. That is how I hired at Google as well. I hired a ton of people who had no identity experience, and I was like looking for the signs around like, hey, are you a coachable PM? Like especially at more junior, like L4, L5 levels. That was my sole kind of thing. I was like, I can teach you to be a phenomenal product manager because I know that craft, but you need to be willing to learn. Like, are you coming with this kind of mindset that isn't that, and then you're set up to fail, right? And you can build all the domain expertise if you can. Are you collaborative? Like, are you inquisitive, right? Are you good with complexity, system like complexity. Like, do you enjoy complexity or do you shy away from it, right? So those were some of my things to like my bar as when I was hiring, and then some of that translates to who I want to work for, right? Like, do they share some of those mindsets?
It seems like you're looking at coachability at certain levels, then maturity in terms of craft at higher levels. And then across these, as the world evolves towards AI, it's more openness and willingness to jump in rather than like, hey, you know what RAG is, and you know like everything about difference between small language models and large language models, just words I heard today. So I'm just throwing those in. To summarize, you're differentiating as PM craft rather than AI expert, and like AI becomes like the enabler for the outcomes.
Exactly. Yes. Like, I want you to be like the business outcomes person first, and who is ambitious, who's willing to kind of take on complex problems at more senior levels for sure. Right. And then even at like let's say the L6 levels, like I would like still look for like the coachability aspect of it, because the craft bar across the industry is not standard. Like, a lot of people like have been PMs for a while, but they have like really not done PMing well, or they have done the best in like whatever leadership environments they were at, right? So as you start to kind of redefine or even reset some of the ways you build products, or how do you kind of partner with like all the different people who you need to kind of deliver outcomes, there has to be some unlearning and relearning. And I do that myself. Like, I believe like that like feedback is great. Like I have blind spot, everybody does. So the same thing happens as like when you come in at more some of these like mid-level kind of seniority levels, where you should be willing to unlearn and relearn. And so coachability to me is like more progressive, like especially important at more junior levels, but also more applicable at mid senior levels as well.
I'll ask you one last question in the interest of time. So you have already shared some of your thinking, but if you were to offer some advice for product managers in today's hiring, tough job market, changing landscape, what would be like top pieces of advice?
There are maybe three things I'll suggest. The first one is invest in your network, right? Like, and invest deeply in your network. Like, don't like do it so that like you're just kind of doing like a surface level like thing, like and it takes time and energy, right? Like, if you are looking for a job, let's say today, it's hard, right? You have to be kind of starting sooner, right? On that kind of journey. But wherever you are in your journey, like do that anyways, right? Like, build genuine connections, reach out to people who you enjoyed working with, right? Whether in your company or outside in the network, outside the company in your network, right? So that's like critical, especially in this kind of job market where there is so much supply that everybody's vying for that like first, like, hey, just look at me, right? Like, talk to me, right? That's kind of really hard. So I would say investing in your network is critical, right? And in there, like, how do you leverage your network is also really important, where make it easy for the person who is who you're contacting, for them to help you, right? It's not like on that person to actually go out of their way. They're doing other things. They have like they have their job. Maybe there are many people reaching out to them, right? How can you make it easy for them to see your fit, to direct you to the right opportunity, right? All of that is a part of like effective networking, right? Building genuine connections, helping people help you better is absolutely critical, right? The second thing is, let's say you have the foot in the door, right? Like, you have the first kind of interview that's lined up. Now, how do you actually make yourself really the right fit for that opportunity? That takes kind of deep research, like potentially leveraging the person who in your network who helped you get there, right? They have an interesting, hopefully, an insider kind of almost perspective on how that role kind of works and what it takes to be successful in that company, that culture, that role, like that, right? So leveraging that is important. Also, in my experience, people under leverage their recruiters, people who are kind of helping them through the process. Like, they are actually one of the really insightful people who understand what that process looks like. Like, when I hired at Google, my recruiter was my best buddy. Like, I would spend a lot of time, like first kind of defining the job description, telling them about what kinds of candidates I was looking for, what my expectations are. When I used to review resumes and look at like the candidates that floated to the top, I tell the recruiter, like, hey, this is why I'm selecting these candidates and this is why I'm rejecting these candidates, right? So the recruiter has actually a really interesting perspective and almost the hiring manager's like inside voice when they are actually there, right? So leverage them, especially if you kind of clear the first kind of recruiter screen and you're going into the interviews, like talk to them, help and it's in their interest too. Like they want to see good candidates being hired. It's a part of their performance evaluations. It's like how good are they in screening and then getting people like successfully done, right? So that's the second thing I would say is like leverage your recruiters, like have that perspective on that job and that team that you're applying for. Use your sources in your network, right? Reach out to people. The third is like in the interviews itself, as PM interviews, like it's like, especially if you're looking at like FANG or MANG kind of companies, the process is pretty defined. Like you can actually go to Exponent or like I think Shobhit has some really good resources there, like where you can actually really understand the process very well, right? And then once you have the process well understood, practice, right? Like many of these kind of interviews are not things that you can just like show up one day and be like really effective, right? When I was doing my ladder transfer at Google, I got this advice from a PM lead, and he was like, Aniket, like before even you start your prep, do a mock interview and see what you do, right? And I did that mock interview, and the rating I got was like no hire, right? So I failed miserably, right, at that first interview. And that kind of set me, like, opened my eyes. I was like, no, I need to kind of invest in these areas. I need to practice, right? I need to get to a point where these interviews should feel like fun, right? If you're a good, strong product manager, these interviews actually are designed like really well, where they test your kind of the right skills and the right mindsets that you need to take. And towards the end of the process, like I was having fun.
I think that's nail on the head. If you enjoy these interviews, you will do well. If you don't, you just never gets to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the last quick thing I'll say is like, once you have done all of this, right, like your journey like doesn't end. Like make sure that you are reaching out to people who interviewed you, add them on LinkedIn, send them like thoughtful notes about your experience. Like if there were any questions that were open or things that you would have wanted to clarify, like feel free to kind of reach out to them, right? Make it easy for the hiring manager to kind of hire you in some ways, right? You can do a bunch of those like really, really good things. But that's kind of my high level, quick recommendation on interviewing.
I just quickly picked on a theme, which is like you're sort of making every step easy for other people so they can help you and like sort of make you the obvious choice, starting from people who want to help you all the way till hiring manager and interviews and following up with them and everything. It's like eliminating friction from products. Similar to that, you're trying to do that. Aniket, thank you so much for this wonderful input. How should people connect with you? I'm sure people will want to follow up with you after the podcast.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, Aniket Vaidya. I think my LinkedIn is Aniket V, and we can add it in the notes here.
I'll put it in all the descriptions.
That's currently the best way to reach me. But yeah, really happy to be here on this podcast with you, Shobhit. It's nice to know you, and I'd love to keep in touch. And yeah, please let me know if there are questions. If I can help in any way, I'm available.
Well, first of all, congrats on your new role. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. I'm sure a lot of people will reach out, and of course, we'll be in touch. Thank you. Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.